You are now listening to Talk Your Jits podcast.
Hello and welcome to Talk Your Jits podcast. This podcast is, as the name implies, all about Jiu-Jitsu. I'm your host, Lamar Smith, and today's guest is a blue belt who trains at Stealth BJJ Madrid, located in Madrid, Spain. Ladies and gentlemen, Teanna Taylor.
Thank you for having me on, Lamar. I appreciate the invite.
Oh man, the pleasure is all mine. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. I've been in the UK for 10 days and I'm back in Spain now, and the skies are blue. And that makes me happy because I don't know if you know much about British weather, but it's not very pleasant. So I'm very happy to be back in Spain where it's nice and sunny.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, let's give the people what they're here for. If you want to give yourself a more proper introduction, by all means, and let's hear about your jiu-jitsu journey.
Wow, where to start? Well, I'm 37. I started training jiu-jitsu in 2014. To be honest, I didn't like it at first. And I kind of fell into it because my partner, who is actually also my coach, was a purple belt at the time. And I would travel around the UK with him to competitions. I knew nothing about jiu-jitsu at all. And all I knew is that if someone taps, that's the end of the fight. That was literally the extent of my knowledge. But I was kind of intrigued, but my background athletically is sprinting and high jumping. I was a track and field athlete for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And when I met my partner, I got into powerlifting and weightlifting. But I wanted to give jiu-jitsu a try. I wasn't expecting very much at all. And I wasn't a natural, and I'm still not a natural. I just work very, very hard at it. I'm always on the mats. I'm not one of these, unfortunately, I wish I was, but I'm not one of these people who picks up techniques really quickly, who can just see something in an instructional and put it into practice. But I believe in working really, really hard for things. I don't believe that things, come easy. And if you really want something, you've got to damn well work for it. That's always been my attitude. And I started training. For me, it was very, very confusing, as it is for most white belts. Mm-hmm. I spent a long time at white belt. I had 7 operations during that time. I was a white belt for 5 years. I developed problems with my internal organs. I had no injuries from jiu-jitsu, but I just don't believe in giving up. So although I was struggling classes, the other issue was consistency with attendance, because my background is academia. When I was living in the UK, I'm now based in Spain, as you mentioned at the beginning. Mm-hmm. I was a teaching fellow and lecturer in English for academic purposes. So my workload meant that I wasn't on the mats anywhere near as much as I wanted to be. And that was frustrating because I learn kinesthetically. I learn through doing. I need to see a technique and then actually do it. I can't just, learn visually, as I mentioned. So I wasn't getting in the mat time. And despite having a really good job, I was just thinking, I want to really dedicate myself to jiu-jitsu properly. So in 2016, I decided it was between New Zealand, the US, and Spain. And I got a full-time teaching fellow position at one of the Spanish universities. And I thought, great, much less stress in the UK, I'll be able to train. So when I moved over here, I found an apartment, and lo and behold, there was a jiu-jitsu academy about 10-second walk from my house. I thought, perfect, this is going to be great. So I started training more regularly, but there were a lot of issues at that club with the instructor. There was a lot of bullying. There was a lot of just really uncomfortable behavior that I was not okay with. But because I was new to Spain, I didn't know the jiu-jitsu culture over here. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, when something happened in the club, I'd look around at everyone else who'd been members there for a lot longer than me. And I was thinking, why do you guys think this is normal? Because like I said, I hadn't been training for very long at all, but because my partner was already training, I had seen where he trained, I'd seen how things worked, and I'd trained myself in the UK, and this was just completely different. So I was like, okay, I'm either gonna have to quit jiu-jitsu or get used to this culture, which I really don't feel comfortable with. And I did notice there was a lot of tension in the classes, made me feel very, very nervous and very, very uncomfortable. And I'd mentioned this to my partner, who came to Madrid 6 months after me because he wasn't proficient in Spanish. So he stayed in our apartment in the UK until the lease was finished, to our tenancy was up. And then he came over, and I would tell him all of this, and he'd say to me, Teanna, you're probably being a bit sensitive, because I'm a very sensitive person. But then we had 5 black belts come over in the space of 4 months. 5 black belts came over from Brazil, and they saw what was happening in the club, and they refused to stay. So that was my first inkling that something wasn't really right there. But I kept going. I kept showing up. Something just told me to keep showing up, keep showing up, keep showing up. And I was very, very nervous in all of the classes. This literally went on for months. I'm quite surprised that I stuck it out. And what's interesting is my partner at the time was a brown belt when he came over to Madrid. And as soon as he stepped on the mats with me, the bullying stopped. And it made me think, wow, that should not be the case. That really shouldn't happen. Just because my significant other is a higher belt, it doesn't mean I should be spoken to like shit and treated how I was.
Exactly.
But that stopped that stopped when he arrived, because he was basically smashing the instructor as a brown belt, and he was obviously a black belt. So I got spoken to properly, but even my partner noticed it. He noticed that people were not spoken to properly. And eventually, to cut a long story short with that, the instructor ended up moving to Brazil. But he didn't actually tell anyone he was going. So then no one had a coach. And my partner was approached by another gym that's not too far from where I live, and was asked if he would teach jiu-jitsu there. So that's how we started Stealth BJJ Madrid. We started off with one club, which is about a 3-minute walk from my house, and that's where I train most of my classes. And then we opened a second club about 3 kilometers from the first one. And that's how Stealth Madrid became born, really. And I kept training. I trained under my coach, my partner, for the first time, because we trained at different clubs in the UK, even though we lived together. Mm-hmm. And the coach, the student coach relationship can be quite problematic when you're romantically involved. But just to emphasize, I was with him anyway before I got into jiu-jitsu. I'm not one of these people who are like, I need to date a black belt. I think that's pretty lame, to be honest, but it happens. It does happen.
It does happen.
It does happen a lot. It does happen. But again, you get white belt guys who want to go out with a black belt girl. So it's not just one way. And we started up the club. At the beginning, it was literally just me on the mats, because it was like my partner isn't proficient in Spanish. I am. So what we did is we started up our website, which is in Spanish, but all our teaching is solely in English. We are the only fully bilingual club in Madrid. So how it works is Gareth, the coach, he's a first degree black belt now. He teaches all the classes in English. Where necessary, I will translate, because there are some people, we are a very multicultural club, which I'm very pleased about. It's lovely to see how the jiu-jitsu community in general, how everyone comes together despite nationality, color, race, sexuality, etc. That's really nice to see. So sometimes I do have to translate, but generally people's English level and proficiency has got a lot better. So so at the beginning it was just me on the mats, and then we grew, and yeah, everything's going really, really well. So that's how Stealth Madrid started. As I said, I was a white belt for 5 years. I had a lot of adversity. And through that, one of those important lessons I learned, and I would stress this to anybody, whether they're a complete beginner, whether they're even not in jiu-jitsu, but thinking about it, whether they're a blue belt, purple belt, is do not compare your journey to other people, because you will end up quitting. You'll end up being down on yourself. You'll end up, but a comparison is the thief of joy. No one has the same things going on in their life. People learn differently. Some people can pick up things very, very quickly. I wish I was one of those people, but I accepted a long time ago that I'm not. So what I do is I compare myself to the fighter I was yesterday, because if I compared myself to other people, I would not be doing jiu-jitsu now. Like right. 5 years is a long time to spend at white belt. So I learned very early on not to compare myself. And that was a very, very good lesson for me. And that's something I still do now as a blue belt. I got my blue belt on the 1st of April, 2019. And my coach is a joker. If it turned out to be an April Fool's, I think we would have split up, because he knew how much that would have meant to me. So yeah, I got my blue belt in April 2019. I was in shock for 4 days. No joke. I was in shock for 4 days. But the first thing I did when I got my blue belt is sign up to do a competition. Because because I really believe in jumping in the deep end. And jumping the deep end I did. Got my blue belt. I did the European Masters in Barcelona. So you've got the Europeans, which happens every January, usually in Lisbon. This year it was in Rome, in Italy. Actually, in 2003, January 2003, it's actually going to be in Paris in France, but normally it is in Lisbon. And every April, May time, you have the European Masters in Barcelona in Spain. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to jump right in and compete, because I have been a blue belt for 2 weeks. I'm going to be against girls who've been a blue belt for 3 years. There's no pressure on me. The pressure's on them. I lost my first opponent didn't show up. She got DQ'd for no show. And so I went through to the semis, and I lost against the girl who had won gold at the European Masters the last 3 years. And she won gold that year as well. But this is exactly what I mean. When are you ever ready when you get a new belt? The answer is you're not.
You're not.
So jump in. Exactly. So I jumped in. I put up a good fight. The girl said to me afterwards, I can't believe you're a brand new blue belt. I was like, yeah, just got it. But I'm not going to lie. When I stepped in that stadium, I saw the level. I was like, Christ, what have I done? But yeah, it was great. It was absolutely great. And I'm nowhere near purple belt yet. But again, as soon as I get my purple belt, I'm straight on those mats competing, because the pressure is not on me. I think there's a real risk in waiting to be ready, because who's ever ready, And I feel really strongly about that. I think you've got to, how can you play the game unless you're willing to roll the dice? You've got to shoot your shot despite the odds. I'm a big believer in stepping up regardless, because, when people watch UFC on TV or what they watch boxing, it's all right for them to criticize and say, oh, that was shit. They're sat on the sofa. They're not up in the stadium. It takes guts to step up. So I do encourage my teammates, because I co-run both the clubs with my partner, as I said, to compete like early on. Obviously, with white belts, you have to know some things. You can't just like be training for a week and then jump into competition. That I definitely would not advise. But, I'm not quite ready. I really, like sharing my experiences with my lower level teammates, because there are some people who had, I've seen over the years, had great fundamentals, great white belts, but then they just left it, and then they put pressure on themselves, and then they didn't step up and compete, and they could have done really well. So I'm very much of the mentality of go up there, do your best, what happens, happens.
Definitely. And yeah, I agree with you on that about your rankings and stuff like that. But it's like if you go out there and you compete as a blue belt, it's not really much changing because you still have that knowledge of jujitsu and your own progression. But it's like, yeah, it is a big test when it's like your first time on the mats as a new belt. Yeah, you're going to end up going against someone who probably been a blue belt for 2-3 years or competes like twice as much as you. So I can see how how challenging that can be, because I almost did that. Because back in I think it was like July, August. Let me see, no, or September. Between those 3 months, I was thinking about doing a tournament that was going to happen in October. So like I was like, okay, that'll give me a month or two to kind of like really really train and then get ready for this tournament. And then that's when I talked to my instructor, and he was like, so when are you doing this tournament? Or he said, when is the tournament? I was like, I think it's like the third week of October. And he was like, okay, so we got to figure it out because we got some stuff to take care of. So I was like, oh. And then he looked at me. I was like, oh. He's like, yeah. So we had to get ready for my brown belt test. And I was like, oh, do I really want to test for like my brown belt and then like a week after do this tournament? So I was like,
yeah.
Nah, I'll just wait until the next tournament. So I'm doing one in January for sure, but I didn't want to do that.
Yeah. No, I see where you're coming from. I do get it. Everyone's got a different mindset. Everyone, handles things differently. Some people don't want to compete at all, which I get. And it's crazy because like some of my teammates are so much better. I'm not being down on myself, but they're so much better than me. They really are. They've got so much more talent than me, but they don't want to compete because of the nerves. But I have quite severe issues with anxiety. This is common knowledge. It's not a big taboo with me. I'm very open about mental health. I have such severe anxiety that when I'm by the mat side or I'm in the bullpen, it's just like another day for me. So I figured because I suffer very, very badly with it, why not get a reward from it? Mm-hmm. I have numerous diagnoses, which again is common knowledge. I have two choices. I can compete or I can complain. I could sit on my sofa. I could not compete. I could just train in the gym. But, like I said, I like to get a reward from it.
Yeah, definitely. And I was kind of in that ballpark too, with competing. I was like, it sounds cool or whatever, but it's not for me. I love to watch it and whatever. But one of my training partners, he did a tournament one day, and I was like, it is what it is. But then I ended up going to a couple more right after, and I was like, all right, this doesn't seem too bad. So I'll throw my hat in the ring and see what happens. And yeah, I was nervous. I was scared of shit because I was like, okay, well, who I'm going to go against? Is this person going to be like super big, super tough, whatever? But it turned out to be both. But but leading up to it, I was like, one of my training partners that was there, who was also coaching me, he was like, how you feeling? I was like, I don't know. I was like, I'm nervous when I first got in there, but by the time I started warming up and getting ready for my match, I was like, I'm cool. Do you know what?
It's interesting. It's interesting you say that, because when I sign up for a tournament, I'll be nervous for I've actually just done my first sub only, which is why I was in the UK.
I saw that,
and I was nervous for about over 2 months. Mm-hmm. But on the day, and it's the same in comp as well. I'll be very, very nervous in the run up. On the day, I'm very collected, I'm very composed, and as soon as I am nervous when I'm by the mat side, because I'm waiting for the match before to finish. So I'm in the right headspace anyway, but I know it's kind of go time really soon. Mm-hmm. So I'm waiting for the match to finish. But as soon as that ref motions for me to come on the mat, it's do or die. As soon as I step foot on that mat, my nerves go and it's go time. And I'm quite glad I have that, because I have I know quite a few people whose nerves don't go. So although everything beforehand is really kind of like stressful and nerve wracking, as soon as I step on that mat, I'm like a different person.
Yeah. Yeah. And then after my match, it was only one match because a few of the competitors didn't show. But yeah, like as soon as I got done, I was like, you know what? I want to do another one.
Yeah.
Like I got that itch to want to compete. So I'm hoping that 2023, I'll be able to compete a lot as much as possible. So I'm shooting for at least 5 tournaments, regardless of the outcome. I just want to do them and gain that knowledge and experience. But yeah, I definitely would like to start competing a lot more.
Yeah, I totally get you there because like I said, I got my blue belt in April 2019. I competed a hell of a lot. I made the podium every competition. It was great. But then I remember the date. It was the 8th of December, 2019. I'd signed up for the Europeans in Lisbon 3 days before, and I blew out my ACL in a freak accident, double leg gone wrong in a takedown.
Oh.
And it wasn't just my ACL, it was my external meniscus. And I actually lost my job as a university professor because of this injury.
Oh, wow.
So through my work, I had private insurance. Okay. So I'm waiting for my date to have full ACL reconstruction. My European dream was, I'd actually won silver the year before at the Europeans at white belt. And that's another story. That's actually my proudest medal, which I'll come on to if we have time.
Oh yeah, we definitely got time.
Yeah, but like when you say it's a white belt, no one really cares about white belt, but because of the circumstances before, it was a very, very important competition for me. But basically, it was the last round and I actually wanted to rest, but I thought, no, come on, Teanna, you've got to push yourself because you're going to do the Europeans. And I went to take down a teammate and she went to catch me in close guard and her leg went into the side of my knee and I couldn't be moved for 45 minutes. God gave me a great pair of lungs, but I screamed the gym down like you would not believe. And I physically couldn't be moved. And my coach was like, did you hear a pop? Did you hear any sound? I'm like, no, I didn't hear anything, but I was screaming my head off and it turned out to be ACL. And I didn't really know much about ACL. All I knew, it was the injury you never want to have as an athlete. That's all I knew. So I got fired from my work. And then because I had health insurance through my work, they cut that off. And I was like with the traumatologist in Spain, I said, listen, I have been fired. I need to get this surgery ASAP because they are going to cut off my insurance and I'm not going to be able to afford, because I'm essentially now unemployed. I'm not going to be able to get this surgery under the healthcare plan because they're going to cut it off. Mm-hmm. So thankfully I got the surgery just in time. Before it was cut off. I'd already been fired at this point, but then they have to go through the official paperwork to remove you from the insurance plan.
Right.
But unfortunately, I had the surgery for the full ACL reconstruction. It was really bad because some people have who do their ACLs as severely as I did actually. Can like walk a bit or they do a little bit of rehab, like prehab before surgery. Mine was so badly damaged that despite being in the leg brace from my thigh to my ankle and being on crutches, I was still falling over. It was absolutely horrendous. And to go from competing once, maybe twice a month to not being able to walk led me in a really, really dark place. It was really bad. And also I had lost my job. And this is the job that I had moved from the UK to Spain for. So that was like a double whammy of like, for someone who specializes in linguistics and language, I still struggle to articulate how bad that time was. So we're talking February 2020. I have my ACL reconstruction, come out of hospital, COVID hits 2 days later. Now, our lockdown in Spain was very, very severe. like, I know it's different. I'm not aware of how everything was in the US. I know because states are very, very different. I know some states took it very seriously. Others were more lackadaisical. But in the UK, it was basically a joke. But we had the army in the streets. We had the police in the streets. And you could not go out except to go to the pharmacy, hospital, or the supermarket, and there were police everywhere checking while you were out. So because I had literally just had surgery, I could not walk. COVID hit, that meant I couldn't access any physio, I couldn't access any rehab, and I basically had to do what I could in my house. And I don't know how much you know about ACL injuries, but you need to rehab properly. You can't just leave it. But I basically had no choice. So my coach is also a qualified personal trainer. He rehabbed me as much as I could, but I didn't get the intense rehab and support that I needed because of COVID, which was not anyone's fault, but it was just like, oh my gosh, can anything else go wrong? And then 10 days after the first surgery, I had to go to court for an unfair dismissal hearing because there's a law in Spain that means that while you are on sick leave, you cannot be fired. And I had a permanent full-time contract and I got fired on that, but they didn't know that I may not be Spanish, but I'm not. My mama didn't raise no fool. I was in a union. So I had all my legal costs covered. There's me going to court and a full leg brace on crutches. And it didn't have to go any further because it was just like, this is one of the worst, they said the worst cases of unfair dismissal that they've seen.
Man,
so,
I'm telling you.
Yeah, so 2020 was rough for a lot of reasons and not just COVID. So then I was unemployed. I couldn't train. I couldn't rehab properly. I did the best I could, but I knew that it wasn't enough. But again, still at this time, I knew ACL was the injury no one ever wants. But I don't think I quite understood the magnitude of it. I did what I could. Which was very limited because if you went to a gym, if you tried to just go into a gym, even though everything's locked down, because people were doing this in the UK. If the police turned up, they'd in the UK, they'd give you a warning. Spain doesn't work like that. Spanish police officers do not mess around. You get a 20 grand on the spot fine.
What?
Okay. So I could not, no warning, 20 grand on the spot fine, no ifs, no buts. That's how it works over here. Very, very, very different to the UK.
Oh my.
UK has very softly approach. That's not the case in Spain. I'm doing what I can, trying to build up my quad strength, etc. And when gyms opened again, I can't even remember how many months later this was. It was a long time though. It was a very long time. We had to roll in masks. I was only doing a little bit of drilling. But because I think I didn't have the input from either physios or rehab specialists that I desperately needed for such a severe injury, my ACL went again. And this time it was different to the first time. The first time, as I said, I was screaming for 45 minutes. I couldn't be moved. And then, unfortunately, it was working with the same training partner. And she's actually so she's actually my weight. So it wasn't like some massive guy did some dick move on me. It wasn't anything like that. It was just bad luck. And I felt something go in my knee, but because it wasn't the intensity of my ACL going the first time, I thought, okay, something's gone, but it's okay. I started to roll with another teammate and I had to stop. And I was like, to my coach, I said, something's not right. Went back to the knee surgeon. I had another scan. ACL rupture. I was like, I could not believe it. I was so devastated. Is probably, again, language. I can't accurately depict how I felt. It felt like my world had just fallen down because not only have I lost my job, okay, I then wasn't able to work because I couldn't walk. So I focused on running the clubs. I deal with all the, as I said, my coach, who's the first degree black belt, he does all the teaching in English, but I get a lot of inquiries via Facebook, email, our website, Instagram, and they're all in Spanish. So because I'm proficient in Spanish, I deal with that, and he deals with the teaching side. And I just couldn't believe I needed surgery again. I could not believe it. But thankfully, the first operation was in February 2020. My second reconstruct, all of this happened within 13 months. But by the time I got the surgery, it was March 2021. But this time COVID had settled down a bit. So I had the surgery, and because I'm an athlete, I was put on an elite athlete program for rehab and physio. And that meant I got 2 hours of rehab and physio 5 times a week. And I got picked up from my house in an ambulance, and I got brought home in an ambulance as well. And that was pretty grueling. But I was so grateful because the first time round, obviously, I didn't get anything because of COVID and everything was shut down. So I was put on, can I just mention here, I'm not saying I'm an elite athlete. I'm not a world-class black belt or anything like that. But that's the program they put me on because I take jiu-jitsu so seriously. So I had rehab for 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. And it was really, really good. And actually, during the second surgery, they removed all the fibrosis, all the scar tissue that had built up because I didn't have the input from physio and rehab that I needed. So things like before I had the second surgery, things like walking up the stairs, I'd feel stiffness in my knee. And that's because I had a lot of scar tissue, and all of that was removed. And I have a lot of scars on hang on, I'm so bad with left and right. With my right side of my body, because I had surgery on my thigh because I had a suspected muscle disorder. They expected a problem with my muscles due to the amount of CPK I was producing. So I've got a big scar on my thigh. I have scars on my ACL scars on my right knee. And yeah, so I was thinking, okay, well, that can be the bad side of my body. I don't have any tattoos. I just have scars. So I was like, that's fine. The rehab went really well. I recovered really well. I came back to jiu-jitsu in November 2021. So November last year. That's when I came back properly. Okay. And my comeback competition was going to be the Europeans this year, 2022. And I was so excited. Everything was going really well. And then my coach had a trapped nerve in his shoulder. And he took some painkillers. He doesn't normally take any medication. And he nearly died. So he was, yeah, it's almost laughable. So he's in hospital. Okay. He has absolutely zero defenses. And when the doctor told me this, I thought she meant like his defenses were really, really low. But in Spain, they prescribe a lot of very strong pharmaceuticals. In this particular tablet, it's called metamizole, also known as Nolotil. And it's banned in the US, it's banned in the UK, it's not banned in Spain. But it's actually a very effective painkiller. And he took it, but because there's something about, no one can really say what the issue is with it, but if you're white, you really shouldn't take it. A lot of tourists have been dying because they're being prescribed it. But it's a very effective painkiller, but it put him in hospital.
Oh, wow.
So my training was for the Europeans was interrupted quite a lot because I had to go and see him every day, make sure he was okay. He was in a really bad way. It looked like he wasn't going to pull through. So that was so stressful. I honestly, it's just, you couldn't make some of this up. You really can't. But thankfully he pulled through. He insisted on coming to the Europeans with me. And I wasn't too hot on that because COVID was still around. In Italy, we had to wear a certain, you couldn't get into Italy without a specific, it was an FFP2 mask.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the world was basically back to normal, but Italy wasn't, and Spain certainly wasn't. And he came to the Europeans with me. I hadn't competed for 2.5 years partly because of COVID, but obviously I had 2 ACL reconstructions. And I won my first fight by submission, and it was the best feeling in the world. It was like, yes, I'm back in the game. I was so excited. I unfortunately lost on points in my second fight, but I came away with bronze, and that was amazing. That was an amazing feeling. I'm like, yes, I'm back. I'm back in jiu-jitsu. Because to go from competing like up to twice a month to then not being able to walk and then having 2.5 years out, that was a massive, massive change. I mean, really, really dark place mentally. So then I had my combat competition. So after the Europeans, I signed up for 4 more competitions in the coming months. Really excited, had a new game plan, really looking forward to executing it and showing what I could do on the mats. And then 2 weeks after the Europeans, I started getting a bit of just like stomach and back pain, didn't think too much of it. And it started to affect me on the mats though. So I thought, do you know what, I'll just get this checked out. I went to the doctor and she commented that I've lost a hell of a lot of weight. But the thing is, when you've got an ACL injury and you can't really walk around, you are going to put on some weight. And I'd lost, I had lost a lot, but that's because I was active again. And she examined my back, but she didn't examine my stomach. And that was a big mistake. So there's me on the mats trying to I've got a very high pain tolerance, a very, very high pain tolerance, almost too high, I would say. And yes, this is 2 weeks after the Europeans. I'm on the mats. I'm preparing for these upcoming comps, 4 I've signed up to. And I've got a really good friend who I'm recording with later in Maryland. And it was a Saturday morning. And he said to me, Teanna, you really should go to the ER. And I'm like, oh, I can't be dealing with that. But I really didn't feel well. And I ended up going to the ER. And I'd been ill for 9 days by this point. Mm-hmm. And the doctor examines me and said, how many hours have you been like this for? I was like, hours? I said, I've been like this for 9 days. So I was immediately rushed in for an emergency. How do you say it in English? What's it called? This is when I spend so much time speaking Spanish. Emergency CAT scan. Yeah, emergency CAT scan.
Okay.
With contrast, and it showed not only did I have appendicitis, I had a ruptured ovarian cyst, and I had basically been training and been in pain for 9 days.
And you just working through it.
Yeah, because I'll come back to another story later on, but I'm used to, I can withstand a lot of physical pain. But when he said, it's because I said, when the doctor asked me how many hours I had been in pain for, and I was like, I've been in pain for 9 days. That was when he was like, okay, this is serious. So he, the scan showed acute appendicitis and a ruptured ovarian cyst. I was like, well, that explains a few things. Rushed straight into theatre, whipped out my appendix, sorted out the ovarian problem, stayed in hospital a few days. Then I had a checkup. I think it was a few days later with the gastroenterologist and the surgeon who performed my surgery. And I was sitting in the waiting room feeling really, really unwell. And apparently, I didn't know this later, but I went a funny colour, and the receptionist said, I'm taking you down to the ER, because I was an outpatient at this point. I had another scan, and it showed that my pelvis was full of fluid, and they needed to open me up again and remove it. And I was like, are you effing kidding me? Like,
holy crap.
I had surgery like 4 days ago, and you are open me up again. It's like, we don't have any choice. I said, well, what's caused this? Because I was thinking maybe with a ruptured ovarian cyst that, maybe they didn't get out all the fluid caused by the rupture. But they said, they cannot pinpoint the cause of fluid in your pelvis. So then I start thinking, okay, if this has happened now, is this going to be a periodic thing? So that wasn't pleasant at all, because I'm very used to being in theatre. I think I mentioned I've had 17 operations now, and when I'm in, because my organs don't want to play ball. The only two surgeries I've had related to Jitsu were the two ACL ones, but I'll come back to some of the others in a bit. But basically, when I'm in theatre, my heart rate is really low because I'm so calm. I know the drill. I know how everything works. And they asked me if I was an athlete because my heart rate was, I was like, yeah, but I know how everything works. So I know what you're going to do. But what was scary the second time when they had to extract this fluid from my pelvis is I woke up sooner than they had anticipated from the general anesthetic. And I can't breathe. And I'm like, okay, don't panic. Okay, now I'm panicking because I can't breathe. So basically, when I woke up before for the first operation I had, I wasn't intubated. They'd taken the tube out, and I'm like drastically waving my hands because there's something in my throat and I can't talk and I can't breathe. And I'm trying to get their attention. I'm waving my hands, like drastically trying to say, look, there's something wrong. And then the surgeon pulled the tube out of my mouth and I could breathe. And that was scary. That was scary because thankfully I could move my hands. I wasn't like paralyzed, because, you hear stories of people being awake and feeling stuff and not being able to communicate because they're paralyzed, but that wasn't the case. So, and then after that, I again went in a pretty dark place because I'd just come back to jiu-jitsu after 2.5 years off. I couldn't do the comps I'd signed up for. I understood that I needed to rest because when you've had, I had 2 emergency stomach surgeries, and then I needed intestinal surgery. So within a month and a bit, I had 3 operations. So the idea of having knee on belly was just not a good one at all.
No.
So I wasn't able to compete. But what was really difficult for me is my weight category for jiu-jitsu is 64 kilos, which is about 140 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And after the surgery, I was 54 in gi, so that's about 119 pounds. Okay, so I'm used to, my coach trains me for strength and speed because, as I mentioned, I started off doing powerlifting and weightlifting. So I've got a 232 pound squat and a 310 pound deadlift. I'm naturally very, very strong. And I was so skinny, and so it was very, very odd for me because like people were complimenting me on my appearance. I'm like, you don't understand, I'm an athlete. I don't want to be this skinny. Mm-hmm. Because a 20-pound drop is really significant. And I did not feel comfortable in my own skin. And from a psychological point of view as well, part of recovering from ACL surgery was getting my quads really, really strong and having strong legs. And I just had sticks for legs. There was nothing to me. My bones were protruding, and people were. I'm very outspoken. I'm not typically I'm not Spanish anyway, but there are lots of ways that I do not fit into Spanish culture, and I will speak my mind. And that some people, but I'm always very polite, but some people don't quite know how to take me in that sense because I'm not someone who will keep her mouth shut, and I'm very unapologetic about that. But I would have people telling me, oh, Teanna, you look really good. And I'll say, listen, I'm really underweight. I feel like shit and it's affecting my training. This is not good. And I'd have, oh, but women always want to be thinner. It's like, not all of us, mate. Let's not make like sweeping generalizations here. I want to be a tank. It's what I do. That's how I fight well. So it was a very, very difficult change. And in June this year, I had been cleared to compete because my surgeons knew that compete was really important to me. And there was a competition in Madrid. And now I normally compete internationally. I travel a lot to compete. Because I'm probably one of the few people who actually don't mind the IBJJF. I don't like their prices, but I prefer to do higher level competitions for the challenge. And there was an IBJJF comp in June this year. It's normally November, but because it wasn't like that far away from where I'm based in Madrid, I thought I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I did gi and no gi. And as I said, my normal weight category is 64 kilos, 140 pounds. I weighed in my gi. It was 118 in the end.
Ooh.
So I was like way under. But I knew what I was getting into before I did the comp. I knew I had to have 8 weeks off training. Because like I said, you've essentially had 3 surgeries. Yeah. Knee on belly, you can't be training. But because it was like kind of like on my doorstep, although I had to pay a lot to do gi on no gi, again, I thought, what's the worst that can happen? I tap out. And actually, in my category and the absolutes, in my category, I lost my first fight. The same girl, the other people didn't sign up for the absolute. So again, I had to fight her in the absolute. I lost in gi. And she was the only one signed up for no gi. And I had to fight her twice in category and absolute. I lost 4 fights in one day to the same girl. But the thing is though, I know that I wasn't 100%, but it's like, I want to be careful here because I don't want to say to people, you know, if you're not well physically, you should still get up and compete. I want to make that really clear that I'm not saying that. I did get the all clear from my surgeon to compete, but because of my style of jiu-jitsu, it meant that I had 4 dominant subs, but I couldn't finish them because I was lacking the strength from being so small. So, yeah, just a disclaimer there. I'm not saying compete if you're ill or have recently had surgery, but I did get the all clear. But I think mentally, because I had 8 weeks off and I don't go into competitions without being really well prepared, I was actually more nervous than the Europeans. But I always managed to take something from my competitions and my training. So I don't regret it at all. Yeah, I lost, but, you know, I stepped up. So yeah, that was probably the worst I've done in competition. But again, it's so easy to like say, well, you weren't well, blah, 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 blah. But I knew what I was getting into. I don't believe in like laying out excuses before, because then that just gives you like a get out of jail free card. If the competition had been in another city and I had to travel, I wouldn't have done it. Mm-hmm. It's simply because it was really close to my house. I thought, what have I got to lose? You know? And yeah, I did lose, but you know, I did lose, and I lost my the extortionate IBJJF fees. But you know, you take the risk or lose the chance.
Yeah. And
the odds weren't in my favour, but you know, there's always I think, you know, there are always reasons why you can't do something or you should wait. But I just, you know, because although I hadn't trained for 8 weeks, I tried to take the pressure off myself, but actually looking back, I actually put more pressure on myself, which makes no sense at all, because everyone else in my category was well. And I was well, but I hadn't been training. So it was kind of like, well, Teanna, what do you expect? But again, I always strive to be the best athlete I can be. And I've overcome worse. As I mentioned previously, my proudest medal that I've ever won was at the IBJJF Europeans in 2019. Have we got time to go into this story? Because I don't know how long you want your podcast to be.
No, by all means, go ahead. I am enjoying this ride.
Yeah, I can talk for England and Spain in 2 languages. So my partner was and my coach was working for Progress Jiu-Jitsu. They come out of Manchester, actually. Progress, very big, very, very well known fight label. And it was, so I moved to Spain 2016. Yeah, it was January 2017. He was working for Progress Jiu-Jitsu at the Europeans. They had a stand there. And the Europeans to me was something I'd heard of. heard it was like really prestigious. So I flew out January 2017 just to see the venue, because for me and my anxiety, it really helps me to know what I'm walking into. So if I know what the venue looks like, that helps ease my nerves. So 2017, I'm not competing, I'm still a white belt, but I go in, I soak up the atmosphere. And I looked on those maps. I said to myself, one day I'm going to be here. I'm going to compete here. And that's non-negotiable. I'm going to make it happen. Didn't know how I was going to make it happen. I was a really low-level white belt, so much to learn. But I was so inspired. I was soaking up the atmosphere, and I absolutely loved it. I got to meet Leandro Lowe as well, which was really, really special, especially with his extremely sad passing. And yeah, I was like, one day I'm going to be here. So 2000, fast forward to 2018, December 2018. No, when was it? Sorry. Okay, I'll pause there so you can edit that bit. Yeah. So January 2017, I fly out just to soak up the atmosphere, see what it's like. This is my dream. I'm going to compete here. And I hadn't actually competed at all by that point. And it was around November, I think, I started competing. And in the run up to the comp, I wasn't feeling great physically. And I thought, okay, I'm an academic. I have a lot of work. I work in a university. It's my job. I'm just run down. I didn't think too much of it. I did my first comp. I was obviously nervous, but I loved it. I got tapped in. I got triangled in 1 minute 15, but I loved it and wanted to do it again. Mm-hmm. And I had another comp in Malaga. It was the AJP tour that year. So this is 2 months later, and I noticed that in the run up to the comp, my heart didn't seem to be beating properly. And I was thinking, well, that's strange, because I'm healthy as far as I know, and I've already competed now. So why am I so nervous? And it was particularly the day before the comp. I was like, Christ, something's not quite right with my heart. Again, just put it down to nerves. White belt, very inexperienced competitor. It's going to be nerves. So I fight, I win gold, which was amazing. It's such a good feeling. I mean, I love the hand raise. You find me someone in jiu-jitsu who doesn't love the hand raise, I think everyone will say the same thing, whatever rank they are. Right. And came back from that competition, and I think something's not right with my heart. And then over the next few days, I was taken to ER with I had 3 suspected heart attacks. And I was thinking, what is going on?
What?
And it turned out it wasn't my heart, it was my liver. So my liver wasn't working properly. My liver enzymes were off the charts, abnormal. So immediately the doctors are thinking hepatitis, HIV, all these things they tested for all came back clear. And they couldn't treat me because they didn't know what caused it. So I was kind of in limbo. And I didn't know what was wrong with me. I would wake up screaming in the night, holding my chest with pain down my arm. This is why they thought initially it was heart attacks. Then what happened was I dropped 25 pounds in a month. I developed black spots all over my face, and I had real trouble breathing, but nobody knew what was wrong with me. I was in hospital 4 times a week. Again, I couldn't work at this point. And I was gutted. I was absolutely devastated because so many people avoid competing. I had just started competing. And then I have this illness and nobody knows the cause of it. So I'm in hospital 4 times a week. And this goes on for, oh my God, I can't even, it was over a year. It was over a year. And I was seeing an internal medicine specialist, and she, I don't know how it works in the States, but in the UK, whenever you see a specialist, they will, if you get referred to someone, it's all done by computer, and you'll just get like the appointment in the post. It doesn't work like that in Spain. What happens is the referral gets handed to you as the patient. You can see what it says and everything. So I read it, and it said the internal medicine specialist had written, "Patient looks sadder and sadder every time I see her." And she asked me, she asked me how I was coping. I was like, well, it's really crappy being in hospital 4 times a week. And it was a really depressing hospital. This was a military hospital, but it's the one closest to where I live. So that's where I was referred to. And I was, the internal medicine specialist said to me, "I want you to see a psychiatrist." And I said, "Oh, I've actually already got a psychiatrist and psychologist." And her response was, "I want you to see someone here." And I was like, "Well, I'm struggling. There's no harm in that. I'm a big advocate for mental health." And so I welcomed any additional support. So I had an appointment, and it was on a Friday. I remember it being very, very cold. And because I was having so many appointments to find out what was causing what turned out to be grade 1 liver disease, which is ironic because I don't even drink, because Brits over here have got a really bad reputation for, like, football hooliganism, drinking, that partying, that kind of thing. So I knew it wasn't that. And because I was always in hospital, I would say to my partner, "I've got a hospital appointment," but didn't necessarily tell him where I was going. But this particular morning, I said to him, "Oh, I'm going to name of hospital," which I won't mention, but it's a military one. "I'll be back within the hour." So I go to this appointment, and I see the psychiatrist. I explain, "I've actually got a psychiatrist and psychologist. I don't really want to waste your time, to be honest, madam." And she looks at me. We talk about what's happening with all these tests and stuff. I said, "Yeah, it is getting me down because I can't work. I don't want to lose my job." Ironically, ended up losing my job for my ACL. And yeah, it's really depressing being in hospital 4 to 5 times a week.
Right.
We talked a bit about my mental health, and she takes off her glasses. She looks at me and she says, "Teanna, I've been in psychiatry for over 30 years, and I'm very, very good at what I do. But I've never met anyone quite like you." And I was about to joke, "Well, thank you very much," thinking I'm unique. And then she said to me, "Would you mind coming with me to get a second opinion from one of my colleagues?" And I said, "Well, how long will this take? Because I've got to see a liver specialist the other side of Madrid, north of Madrid, and it's taken me a long time to be able to book in with him." And she goes, "This won't take very long at all." So I follow her through the hospital. Bear in mind, I've been in this hospital 4 times a week for God knows how long. And she's taken me through, but not in psychiatry. So she's taken me through corridors I hadn't seen before. We go into a lift, and we go up to floor 7. And I'm just kind of like, not really paying attention. But to get to floor 7, you don't press a button in the elevator. You need a key. Okay.
Oh,
so this is the first warning sign that something's about to go down. So we go up to level 7. We go into this, what looks like a ward. And then she goes into her colleague's office. And then she tells me to just stay there. And then she wait outside. She has a quick word with her colleague. And then she comes back out, says goodbye. And I'm like, what? So then right. I get invited into the office, and this is her colleague. He's a psychiatrist. He informs me that I have been detained under the Spanish Mental Health Act, and I will not be going anywhere. And I'm like in shock. He took away my phone. He took away my underwear. He took away all my clothes. All my money, basically all of my possessions, including my underwear. And I was like, whoa, I've come here for a second opinion.
Right.
What the fuck is going on? Like, and I'm in shock as well, because in Spain, if you are not married, your partner, if you have a boyfriend or girlfriend, is not considered family. Right. And they have a policy where you cannot contact anyone for 24 hours. And I'm like, I've come here for a second opinion. I've got to be in San Gennaro, which is the other side of Madrid, to see a liver specialist. And he said to me, Teanna, you are not going anywhere. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? So basically, I got involuntary detained in a maximum security military asylum. And this was in the run up to the Europeans. And I don't forget, I had gone to the Europeans just to look at the venue. I was signed up to compete. I had this stuff going on with my liver, but I wanted to compete. Definitely wanted to compete. And it was just like my dream was disappearing. It was absolutely horrendous because also, if you are involuntarily detained in psychiatric care on a Friday, the weekend doesn't count as your days in the unit. I can't call it a unit. It was an asylum, but well, we'll go with unit. So I'm like in absolute shock. And if I hadn't have told my partner where I would have been that day, he wouldn't have a clue where I was.
I was just about to say that. Like, I'm happy you did tell somebody, because you'd have been lost.
Yeah, because also I have absolutely no family here at all. And ironically, when I was working at university, I was teaching English for, and that one of the things I was teaching was English for anatomy, medicine, anatomy, and psychology. Ironically, I was teaching it in English, but then I needed to know all the vocabulary, like for my liver and stuff, in Spanish, and also for psychology, although this is more psychiatry. And nothing was explained to me. It was very, very scary, incredibly scary, because you could not leave. All that happened was they wake you up in the morning. You're not allowed to lie down. I've spoken to a lot of people who've been in psych wards, and they are allowed to go in their room. Okay, fair enough, you're not allowed a phone or whatever, but they are allowed to lay down. That wasn't the case, because I was in a maximum security ward. There was a bathroom outside each room, each person's bedroom, but there was no mirror. Not that you needed to look in the mirror anyway, but because it was a maximum psych ward, some people might have, I don't know, smashed the glass if there was a mirror and self-harmed or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I wasn't a danger to myself. I wasn't a danger to anyone else, but I'd been diagnosed with stress-induced psychosis, and the cause of that was not knowing what was wrong with me. So when you get a diagnosis like that, the first thing they do is drug tests, because they're thinking drugs. Everything comes back clear, and they're absolutely stumped. They're like, she's not well, but all her drug tests are clear. Test me again. All drug tests are clear. And I was around a lot of people who were very, very ill. Very ill. You couldn't have a conversation with anybody because people were just very, very unwell. And I was unwell. I recognize that, but I should not have been put in that unit. It was not the right place for me at all.
Right.
My boyfriend had been expecting me back within the hour, and I didn't come home. He, thank God, turned up at the hospital. And he was like, my girlfriend came here for a routine psychiatric appointment. Where the fuck is she? And he refused to leave. But nobody told me that he was there. No one told me he turned up. I was lied to a lot. When I was in the unit. And over the weekend, I was just medicated. And I was asking, what are you giving me? And the response was, you're here involuntarily. I don't have to give you that information. So I know now, but at the time I had no idea what I was being medicated with. And I'm thinking, I've got Europeans. I should be training for the Europeans. And there's me doing Gracie gaps on the floor. There's me trying to do triangles on the floor. They already thought I was batshit crazy anyway. So I thought, this isn't going to hurt. I am doing the Europeans. Mm-hmm. I literally flew there just to see what it was like. And it just felt like my dream was slipping away. The British consulate got involved because the way that I was detained was not correct. Basically, I was tricked. The woman who said, Teanna, I've been a psychiatrist for 30 years. I'm very good at my job. Well, if she'd been a psychiatrist for 30 years and she's that good at her job, she damn well know I was going to be involuntarily detained against my will. She just needed to get me in the ward. So I had a real issue with that. And the way that it happened is exactly how I said. The British consulate in Madrid were ringing up all the time, saying, "What on earth is going on? How the hell has this happened?" And this really annoyed the psychiatrist, who was going to give me a second opinion. And I was actually due to have surgery. It was just a biopsy on my thigh to rule out a muscle disorder because I still had these issues with my liver. And they refused to do it because that would mean I would have to lay down in my room. And that wasn't allowed because all our rooms were locked. So I'm just thinking about jiu-jitsu. I was like, this is my dream. I don't eat any Spanish food at all. So I couldn't eat on the ward. I was just living off bread and the odd apple and biscuits.
Oh,
and
my.
it was fucking horrendous. The guy in charge of the ward ended up getting so sick of the British consulate calling. He got me transferred to a different ward, and that was better. Because you weren't watched when you were showered, because in the maximum security ward you get woken up, you get your room searched every day, you're watched while you're showered. And I don't have a problem with that. I'm very comfortable being naked. And that's actually come from jiu-jitsu, because I will happily get, take my gi and shorts off in front of my teammates. Not bothered about that at all. I wasn't allowed to use any deodorant and that was really frustrating because part of the liver issue that I had left me with massive problems sweating, which I actually still have now. And I was like, look, I've got a liver issue. I need deodorant. So finally they agreed I could have deodorant, but it had to be locked in a cupboard. I don't know, maybe they thought I'd squirt it in my eye or something like that. But there were some very, very ill people on the ward. And when I was transferred to the second one, the people there seemed a little bit more with it. And when I say a little bit more, I mean slightly more with it. And looking back, I can see why they thought I was delusional, because I'm like, I need to get out of here. I've got the European Championships in Lisbon.
I got jiu-jitsu to do.
I've got jiu-jitsu to do. But then when you hear the stuff the other people in the ward were saying, I kind of get now why they thought I was delusional. So because this was December, so Christmas time, people were told they could help decorate the ward, etc., or you can make something for yourself. And then I made something for myself, and then you have to present it to the group. And I got some cardboard, I got some gold ribbon, and I made a European medal. I put my name on it, my weight class, the year, and I explained and it was gold because I was going for gold.
Of course. And
I presented this to the group when I'd finished it, and I looked around, and the guy who seemed most well there, I saw him raise his eyebrows, and I saw two psychiatric nurses roll their eyes, and that's when it hit me. They think I'm delusional. They don't. And now looking back, I can see why, because some of the stuff the other people were saying made absolutely no sense. And I was like, I'm not getting out of here. And I was called into the office, and I was like, right, I'm going to get some answers. And they said to me, Teanna, it's your court hearing. I was like, what? It's your court hearing. So basically, the hardest thing of being in there is that I wasn't told anything that would happen. So when you're detained, you have to have a court hearing. It's done by video call. It's done by a judge and two representatives. And it was very clear that because the first psychiatrist in the maximum security ward was incredibly pissed off with me for getting the consulate involved, which actually is my right. If you are sectioned, or which is what we say sectioned in the UK, I know in this state you say put under involuntary psychiatric hold, you have the right to you have the right to ask for help from like a charity or someone who will, you know, make sure your human rights are being, you know, respected.
Right.
And they hated that. So I was called into the office and I was like, right, I'm going to get some answers. It turned out to be a court hearing. The court order was taken out against me to detain me for 6 months. But what they did not tell me is that 6 months is a standard court hearing, but very few people will actually be in for that long. But then I just thought the Europeans is out. I was absolutely broken. I was but I wouldn't cry. I would cry. They had cameras in your bedroom as well. There are cameras everywhere. So I would cry under my blankets at night when I was in my bedroom. So I was like, I'm not getting out of here. Yeah, so I was like, I'm not getting out of here. And my European dream just felt like it was slipping through my fingers. But then on this second ward, the psychiatrist was a lot nicer. She spent some time with me. We talked about me being physically ill and how that affected me. And she said to me, I think I'm going to start giving you privileges. I'm going to let you walk around the grounds of the hospital. And the ironic thing is, this hospital is a 10-minute subway ride from my house. So it's like I was always so close to my house, yet always so far.
Mm-hmm.
And this particular hospital, because it's a military hospital, it has like barriers, it has armed guards on the gates and stuff. And yeah, it just happens that that's the closest hospital to me. So yeah, so I was expecting to be able to walk around the grounds. Then I later got called back in, and she said, Teanna, I reviewed your records. You don't need to be here. When your partner comes at 4:00, which is visiting time, you can leave. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I'm getting out of here. I'm getting out of here. I'm getting out of here. And I was just like, I was so anxious. I was like, I'm going to get out of here. And 4:00 came, and I said to Gareth, I said, I'm going home. I'm going home. I'm going home. And I got my phone. I got all my stuff, changed my clothes. He had cycled to the hospital to pick me up. As soon as I got my stuff, I ran out the door faster than Usain Bolt, because I never wanted to. I couldn't leave fast enough. So I was like, what if they change their mind last minute?
Right.
And I ran. Like, he was like, my boyfriend was calling after me. And I was like, I fucking ran to that metro and didn't look back. And I got out. And I thought, okay, everything's going to be okay now. Everything's going to be okay now. It wasn't. That was the start of severe PTSD, like really bad. So some of the stuff I saw in the hospital was really unsettling, particularly in the maximum security ward. There was a guy who was non-verbal. And to this day, we are talking, 4 years later, there was a guy who was non-verbal, and he got Kimura'd twice by a member of staff. And it still bothers me to the core that I didn't step in because I knew Jiu-Jitsu. And it was ironic because in this maximum security ward, on the sign, there were signs on the wall that said, if you as patient see any incidents of assault from staff against patients, it needs to be reported. And I'm thinking, who the hell is going to believe us? We are in a maximum security military asylum. Who the hell is going to take us seriously?
Right.
I saw this one guy get Kimura'd twice. Now, if I had seen that in any other setting, I would have stepped in. But I had to think, if I stepped in, they would see me as trouble and keep me in for longer. And it still really, really bothers me more than I can articulate that I didn't step in. But at that moment, I had to think, I need to get out of here for me. But that haunts me to this day. That really does, because the poor guy was non-verbal. All he was saying, well, he wasn't saying anything. He was just like crying. And to shut him up, they Kimura'd him twice, one of the members of staff. But he wasn't acting up. He wasn't being aggressive. He was just crying. He was just crying.
That's
I saw
rough.
a lot of people cry. Yeah. So then I came out. I was still signed up for the Europeans. I had a couple of days, packed my case, jumped on the plane to Lisbon, my grandmother in Barbados died on my way out to Lisbon. My parents' dog died on the way out to Lisbon. I was thinking, Christ, could anything else go wrong? Arrived in Lisbon, tried to just like focus on the fight. Was in an Airbnb, and then fight day comes. I'm like obviously nervous because this means a hell of a lot to me, and I've just been through something really traumatic. So I really want to win. And I didn't really have time to be nervous because for like really unusually, they were running ahead of time. So I'm in the warm-up area with my coach. We're going over my game plan. And I go to get some water and I have a look at the screen and I see that my bracket's already started. I'm like, oh my God. So I run upstairs, get my gi checked, weigh in, and before I know it, I'm at the side of the mat. And then I'm called on and the ref ushers me on. I win my first fight by submission, get into the fight, did really well, get to the final, and I had to tap. So I won silver. So on silver, I know it's white belt, it's not blue belt, it's not purple belt, it's not anything like really special. But to come from, you know, potentially being in a military asylum for 6 months at least, and then stepping onto the European stage, to me, it was like winning gold. And very few people understand that. And when I did get silver, I kind of wanted to go back to the hospital and say, look, I was not.
I would have rubbed it in their face like, I told you. I told you that I was not meant to be here.
Yeah, it sounds like a good idea, but like, I don't know how much you know about PTSD, but it's really, really debilitating.
Yeah.
And I was saying to my psychiatrist, not the one there, obviously the one who I had anyway, I was saying to him, look, I feel traumatized by this experience. And he kept saying to me, Teanna, people spend longer than a week there. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. 3.5 years later, he agrees I have very severe PTSD. So yeah, it's rough. It's really rough. I still struggle a lot now. It affects my jiu-jitsu in that I will blank out quite a lot on the mats. But yeah, it's rough. It's rough. I am still unable to work because of my mental health, but I will still step up and compete. I'll still step up and compete because it's the one thing that makes me feel quote unquote normal.
Normal, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a little bit of my story. I train a lot. I just need there's a lot of things technically I need to work on. I'm a blue belt for a reason. I'm a progress chaser, not a belt chaser. And I'm really pleased about that because like I said at the beginning, if you start playing the comparison game with other people, you just won't last. And because I co-run a club and I get a lot of inquiries, I can always tell when people say to me, oh, how long does it take to get this? Or how long does it take to earn this belt? Because they might have come from judo or taekwondo or karate, where you can get a belt in a much quicker time than like a black belt in considerably less time than jiu-jitsu. I know they won't last because they're not there for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's my competition experience has been a roller coaster, to say the least.
To say the least. Wow. I'm just soaking all this in. That is crazy.
Yeah, and the thing is though, it's all true. It is. Every word is true. I've done a couple of podcasts on it, and it's weird with mental illness. It's a difficult one because people do not realize that it's not something that goes away. Mm-hmm. I can't speak for everyone, because when people talk about mental health, they have bad times with their mental health, they have better times with their mental health. Because I have 4 different diagnoses, and it affects me every single day. But I think people get quite complacent in the sense of like, well, she does really well in competition, or she always steps up to competition, it can't be that bad. Let me tell you, it really damn well is.
It sucks.
It's how you cope with it. It's how you cope with it. That's the difference.
Yeah.
That's the difference. I mean, I would love to, like, if this wasn't in the background, I would love to see my potential for competing, and that's why I'm not giving up. You see, because I have been every single competition I've done, and I'm not using this as an excuse, because I've actually made the podium in every single competition I've done, although be it some were defaults, and I do keep those separate from my other medals, because I'm very, very honest on social media. There are people who will lose a fight and not post about it because they lost, but everyone knew you competed anyway. Just be honest.
Just be honest, right?
Yeah. So that's why I was really, really had my heart set on representing Hyperfly. And that's something I'm extremely proud of. I'm extremely proud to represent them, because their mantra is very much about stepping up despite the odds. And it's not about how many medals you have. If you know the mantra, it's not about how many medals you have. It's about what you overcome. The record is not what defines you. Trophies can't make you. You don't win through any amount of wealth or even accomplishments. You know, talent may be great, may be a gift even, but it means nothing without heart. What defines you is your heart. It's your courage to stand up for what is right. And sometimes you have to stand alone, but it's about not letting the random misfortunes of life strike you down, or as I say, choke you out, but having the heart to get up and to continue no matter what the circumstances, no matter how many times you have to try. It doesn't matter how much you lose. It means to accept defeat. It means do or die. And that's what I live by. I live by the Hyperfly mantra. And I actually approached them, this is quite embarrassing, but I'll admit it anyway, as a white belt. But obviously you don't really get sponsored as a white belt. And I represent Hyperfly Europe because that's where I'm based. And I loved everything they stand for. I absolutely loved it. I was like, that is me. You know, I may not always win, but I fight with heart and I leave it all on the mats every single time, despite the odds, despite whether it's stomach surgery because I've had, a ruptured appendix or whatever, or ovarian cyst, or even like being in a psychiatric unit or whatever. I will step up. I will always step up. And I actually got rejected the first time, but I applied again as a blue belt, and I got accepted onto the team. So that's one of my proudest achievements, along with winning silver at the Euros after coming out of psychiatric care. So stay fly. You can't teach heart. There's a lot in that, and I really, really identify with that.
Wow. Yeah. I'm just lost. I'm just like so lost for words right now. But
I told you I could speak for England and Spain.
That's awesome. But that was a very, very, very awesome story, and I'm very, very glad and I appreciate you coming on and sharing that with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
No problem.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, I mean, you already said a mouthful, but if you wanted to shout out your school, if you got any competitions coming up in the near future, by all means, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I definitely have to give a shout out to everyone at Stealth Luce and Stealth Porto for helping me prepare for my fights. My teammates are absolutely awesome. They always pick me up. Have to give a shout out to Professor Gareth Lauf, my coach and long-suffering partner, for putting up with me and also traveling with me, because when we travel to compete, it means that he has to get cover for the classes. And with having two clubs and having classes every day, we have like 4 or 5 classes a day. You can imagine that's not an easy task. Massive shout out to XS Guard Mouth Guards, my mouth guard sponsor. Obviously, shout out to Hyperfly Europe for believing in me. Also, shout out to Enhance CBD, one of my other sponsors, and everyone who has stuck by my side, because it means a lot, and I don't forget stuff like that. But shout out to you, Lamar, for having me on.
Oh man, thank you. Like I said, the pleasure is all mine. You are such a badass, and it shows. So yeah, it was definitely wonderful to talk to you, and I would love to have you back again, later down the line of your jiu-jitsu journey, to catch up and talk and to hear more awesome stories about from your training and your growth.
Anytime.
All right, and that's the end of today's episode. I would like to thank my guest Teanna once again for coming on the show. I really hope you enjoyed the tales and some of our experiences. Please go and follow our Facebook and Instagram page to stay up to date on all future episodes. This has been Talk Your Jits podcast. Keep rolling, keep grinding, and remember, long live jiu-jitsu. Have a great day.